We are not wearing a lab white coat and heading into the lab and performing our duties. We are more on the field, on the floor scientist.
Yeah, though they might go ways to pay.
In today's video, we're going to talk about sports science. So, what sports science actually is, what a sports scientist does. To understand that, I feel like we need to take a step back and understand what strength and conditioning is. Now, the profession of sports science or strength and conditioning, how you want to call it, is very new. So, Boyd Epley was the first strength and conditioning coach. He was only hired because one of his fellow colleagues or his fellow coaches, who was a skills coach named Tom Osborne, realized that any athletes who were coming off training with Boyd after their injury were coming back into the teams stronger, faster, and they were even better than their previous versions. That means they were performing better. After having the injury and training with Boyd, Boyd went on to lay a foundation for the NSCA, which we all know how important of an organization NSCA has been. This was done in 1978. Now, what does a strength coach actually does in their job? Now, this is going to depend upon where the S&C coach is working. Is it amateur sport? Usually, S&C coaches are not really working in recreational sports, so I'm not going to give that example. But is it amateur sport? Is it a semi-professional environment? Is it a professional sport? Are these Olympians, or are these sporting clubs? So a lot of things to consider. So that's why the role will differ depending upon where you're working or where the S&C coach works. But usually, a big part of being a strength and conditioning professional is performance testing. Now, again, as I said, if you are just an intern, you might just be overlooking it. If you're a head strength and conditioning coach, you would be all the way deep down into it. That is designing the testing battery and interpreting the results. So, testing is basically when we are looking for what energy system abilities this athlete has, what balance abilities this athlete has, what sort of power they can output, what sort of strengths do they have. And these are just four basic qualities. A good example of a strength-based test would be one rep max testing. Example of some power testing or speed testing would be maybe 5-meter acceleration, 10-meter acceleration, 20-meter sprints, 30-meter sprints. Again, depending upon the sport. Now, these tests are not something a strength coach randomly chooses. So you do a deep down analysis of the sport even before figuring out what test to do. So, for example, a soccer athlete will cover a lot more distances running as compared to a baseball or a cricket athlete. So, testing for soccer athlete is going to look different as compared to testing for cricket athlete. So, testing. Second part is your programming. So, programming is not the programming we usually do in the personal training world. Well, if you're a personal trainer watching this, yeah, I mean, we do follow some same principles, but you have to take into account the sporting seasons. You have to take into account injuries year round. You have to take into account how the athletes are feeling. You have to take into account the space available to you. For example, I've been in places where I've had two different sport teams, and we had three squat racks, and we would have a team come in where both the teams would have a lower body power day, and now I'm left with juggling around, okay, what individual or how do I manage the flow? So that's another part of it. Coming back to programming. Now, programming is basically let's say, for example, if someone works with an Olympian. Now, Olympian have a 4-year training cycle. That means you'll give them a bigger picture that this is a deep down view, that this is how your 4-year training plan is going to look like. And then you'll keep on making adjustments within their blocks or within the training cycles. It could be one month or 2 months or 3 months. Third part of being a strength coach is the actual coaching part. Not that testing and programming is not coaching, but when you're on the floor. So when on the floor means you are helping the athletes to the lift, monitoring the session, making sure the weight room is a safe space for them to chat about anything, be it nutrition, be it exercise technique, be it the sport. Now, coming off from here, what does a sports scientist does? Now, there's no such thing as being a professional sports scientist, although there are some certification by different organizations. But it all depends upon what you're actually doing in the role. Now, a sports scientist will do very similar things to a strength and conditioning. A sports scientist might be vested into one specific area of S&C. They might be interested in exercise physiology. They might be interested in biomechanics. So they might be working very specifically within those departments. But to give you a general idea, sports scientists still do some testing. We are using more and more technology these days. We are doing a lot of monitoring. That means we are monitoring as sports scientists. Now we are monitoring how much of a load this athlete is carrying to, how much of duty cycles, how I call it, or work cycles are they going through, how much of the way they are lifting, and then eventually how much of fatigue they have. How is that affecting their performance, right? How is the amount of fatigue linked to their performance, or how is travel linked to their performance? How do we figure out what is the best position for this XYZ player? That is another part of it. So, for example, if you're aware of cricket, if you're a batsman or if you are a fielder, right? If you're a batsman, what is the best technique for you to play? That will be something in biomechanics. If, as a sports scientist, you do rigorous testing, you might be able to better guide an individual that this is the place you need to feel that you'll be better at. If you're better at 5 meter sprints or 5 meter acceleration or 10 meter sprints, better field close to the circle. If you're someone who is very agile or is very quick to react, better field in the slips. So it's going to depend upon your testing data, but all in all, sports scientists are more and more vested into equipments. Now, this doesn't mean, when I say equipments, this doesn't mean that taking anything that's out there, using it, and then just coming up with some fancy numbers. This won't make sense unless it's specific to the sport, specific to the athlete, and is helping them perform better. Now, one thing to do know about being a sports scientist is that we are not white coat scientists. We are not wearing a lab white coat and heading into the lab and performing our duties. We are more on the field, on the floor scientist. Now, are we using a lot of data? Yes. Are we concerned about return to sport? Return to sport is basically how easily can we have this athlete return to sport after injury? Yes. Are we using gadgets? That's how usual uh, people think of sports scientists. Yes, no, but again, they have to make sense for the sport. Now, are we doing rigorous monitoring? Yes. Now, sports scientists are very evidence based. Not that strength and conditioning coaches are not, although there's a very big interlink between being a strength and conditioning coach and a sports scientist. Sports scientists have to follow the data. There is objectivity on anything. That means we cannot just go by that, oh, I'm a sports scientist and I feel like this is the best thing, so that is why it's the best thing, let's do it. That's not the way to approach it. The best way to approach it is read the data, interpret it, test it, try it, and then implement it. That's how usually you should go. Not that subjectivity doesn't play a role, it does. How you coach them, how you connect with the athlete, but the basis of it, the groundwork of it, is usually more objective. That means we have to go by objective numbers. We have to go by objective data. What does the research says? We'll look at different metrics: force, velocity, speed of bar, jump height, all of those metrics. You'll make sense of that, how stiff you are, how recovered you are, how ready you are for the next game, how has travel impacted you, how has your sleep impacted you. So yeah, we do take all of those considerations. One thing that I personally realize is that, especially about strength and conditioning world, once you're into it, many people view it as just using some gadgets. Now, you get all of the best of the equipment in the world, force plates, timing gates, resistance systems, but if you don't know how to use them, when to use them, why to use them, then you're just wasting your time, wasting your money, or wasting the organization's money you're working with. If you're a strength coach watching this, or if you're a budding sports scientist like me watching this, make sure you take these things into consideration. Now, if you are just here looking at this video to know what sports science is or what strength and conditioning is, I hope that I added some value to it. Thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, comment how did you find the video, like and share with your fellow coaches, fellow strength and conditioning coaches, and fellow sports scientists. I'll see you guys down the road.